California or the Midwest or Canada on these issues. We appreciate the legislature and the governor for giving us the equipment and tools we need to do our job with. Very proud of that. Our ag law has been beefed up. Our northern border security, our interdiction stations. Just recently, we worked with HSI and Border Patrol, had a major fuel theft bust here in Spring Hill, Florida. You can look it up. It's going to be a media release today. Over almost $50,000 was secured. We took down a major ring that was not only in the state of Florida, but around the country. So we're very proud of our ag law. We've got a great team there now. They're doing a great job keeping us safe in our state. Our Consumer Services Division this year has a Operation Safe Summer program. We've removed over 15,000 packages of illegal hemp in our stores just in the last week from this program. We're going to continue to do that. They're targeting our children with these programs. Last year we had an operation called Candy Crush. Nearly 1 million packages were taking off of our shelves, targeting our children. We appreciate the legislature and the governor for the help that they've given us on that program. The team's doing very well. This year, in the budget, we have many good nuggets that will really go unseen. One of them is a transfer switch program. So when we have a hurricane, you lose power. You can't turn power back on the fuel stations because they don't have generators. We've got a grant program this year to be able to put transfer stations within those gas stations so that we can hook a generator to it at the state level and get those fueling stations back up and running very quickly. So we're very proud of that. The governor did a great job speaking about our the water programs, and it's been true how good we're doing. In agriculture, we're doing an amazing job signing our farmers up for what we call BMPs, Best Management Practice Programs. And we have a cost share program just in the Indian River Lagoon alone. We've signed up over 20,000 acres in these last 2 years, more than double what had been there previously. So we're targeting areas of concern and including the whole state, but the cost share program the legislature provides and the governor signs has been amazing for what we've been able to do in agriculture. And this year we're also going to start doing our regional water projects, which is going to take up an additional amount of nutrient load throughout the state. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Florida citrus. President Albritton is from a little community called Wauchula, Florida, and been involved in the citrus business all of his life. I think he's the 4th generation. And over $100 million is in this budget to help your citrus farmers recover from citrus screening through research, through the craft program and replanting programs. We hope in the next 8 or 10 years you will see a lot of citrus farms back here in Central and South Florida, so we're working on that. Last thing I'll mention, this was a priority of mine during when I was Senate President, but one of my #1 priorities then was to identify and define the wildlife corridor. The wildlife corridor in this state, if you want to know what it is, you can Google it. There's a nice little map out there, but if you Google a map of the state of Florida at nighttime, everywhere it's dark on that map, you'll see all the beautiful lights. You'll see the beautiful lights here in this area of the state. You'll recognize everywhere it's dark on that map is a wildlife corridor. It's where our aquifer is recharged, it's where animals traverse the state, and it's where we grow your food. If our grandkids' grandkids are going to have a quality of life comparable to ours, we have to protect the wildlife corridor. In this budget, and thank you legislature and governor, we have $250 million for our rural and family lands program where we go in and buy development rights from farmers. And there's many advantages to buying development rights rather than buying at fee simple property. But we've had record funding. When I became Commissioner of Agriculture, there was about 56,000 acres in that program through the previous 20 years. Today we have over 230,000 acres in it, and certainly we'll have close to 500,000 in the next 2 years. So thank you, legislature. Thank you, governor. Thank you.
And just on the wildlife corridor, we've done amazing work there. There was a provision in the budget to take $200 million out of the wildlife corridor, put it in general revenue. That was not included in the $600 million I did veto that, so that remains in the wildlife corridor. It'll be subject to future appropriations, but I think we need to finish the job there. I think we've done really, really good. You know, it's like we have a beautiful state. Obviously, a lot of people want to be here, but you got to balance that with making sure that the state doesn't end up just concrete, right? I mean, you want to have that, and so I think it's been really good. and we'll continue working on that. So all in all, we continue the mission. I think things from a fiscal perspective, we couldn't be better positioned. We don't know what the future holds in terms of the macro economy or even the international economy. I know that there's a lot of different types of analysis that are out there about what is going to happen over the next 3, 6, 9 months, a year. But we're well positioned either way. So thanks to everybody. If you guys want to come up, we'll make this official. Does anybody have, I don't see any young kids with us here today, which I'm not surprised at. Does anyone have any young grandkids who would like a non-permanent marker to be able to give to them kids? You got it? Oh, that's a bad toss. That's a bad, who else? Oh no, sorry about that. Who else? That's a good toss. All right. All right, so those are, we would give the pens out, but the kids would write on them, and so the parents are like, can you do a non-permanent? I'm like, all right, so we got non-permanent. These are permanent, though. Today's the 30th of June, right at the buzzer.
Okay, no standing, please. We need to make sure you can respond. Ma'am, thank you.
All right. So this budget will take effect at midnight tonight. Well, they were supposed to do it by May 2nd. We got it, I think the mid-June, kind of like, so we've had, there's a lot of line items in there that we've had to go over and kind of do everything, but we got it done, and so here's the Plains Land. All right, so we've got these pens. Anybody? Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I also have, now these guys may not want these. These are Veto pens. But actually, you know what? I need to borrow one of those pens to sign the tax package. I forgot to sign the tax package. Okay. So all you Second Amendment enthusiasts, September 8th till the 31st, no tax on any of the stuff. Ammo, accoutrements. That's really, really historic. And I know a lot of businesses will be happy with the rent going down. Okay, so we have that. All right, so here's the tax and the budget for 25-26 in the state of Florida. All right. Good job, guys. Thank you. All right. So we've got some red pens. So this is the Veto pen. All right, who else? And there were, as vetoes go, I mean, I basically usually try to hit a target about, okay, what do we want the overall budget to look like? And then sometimes there's just a lot of stuff that you kind of have to veto, but this one we really wanted to get the total spending in line with my recommendations from February, and so I think it's 9 or 10 million more, so we got it pretty close. There's some things at the buzzer, but I thought all in all it was good. But we did a little under 600 million, I think. We have done over $3 billion in the past. Now, on the veto, the $200 million for the take away from the wildlife corridor and put in general revenue, I vetoed that. We're not including that in the 600. I also vetoed, they took 750 and put it into some special fund where they're trying to do some constitutional amendment in the future, and it's there. I don't think that amendment's going to pass, so I vetoed the 750, so that's going back into the surplus as well. That's not included in the aggregate number that we gave you for line item vetoes. We also have legislation that's still pending. I think we're going through it. It's like I got all this dumped on my desk like 10 days ago, so we have I think a couple more days to be able to act on all the legislation. So there's a little bit left. We got through most of it. I may need some red pens on some of the legislation as well. Stay tuned. Okay, any questions? Yep. Yeah, no, So, we've, I mentioned our efforts on illegal immigration, stepping up and really helping. And I think the one thing that we have seen over the initial months of the Trump administration is when we'd ask DHS, what can we do? They're just like, we just need detention space. Because, if you bring an illegal in, there is, the media says there is a process they go through, right, to determine whether you're in the country illegally. Some people may have a notice to appear in 7 days and from an immigration judge. Some people may already have an order of, so there's stuff that go into it. And so, but that was the one thing, I've talked to Tom Homan about it, I've talked to a lot of these folks about it. And so we had a plan that we put out and told them, hey, we can execute this. I think we probably put it out about a month or so ago through the Division of Emergency Management under our director, Kevin Guthrie, where we would be able to stand up some makeshift detention space very quickly around the state of Florida. And we were talking about other different possibilities. So DHS was very supportive. So, what we're doing is like the state is doing it. The feds are kind of overseeing and then reimbursing us for the cost. But, we're looking at, okay, where could you do it that's not going to disturb the community, not going to create problems? And, there just happens to be this Dade Collier Airport that's out there kind of in the middle of the Everglade area. And it's not defunct. People say there are training flights that go in there, but it's a massive runway. And, there's not a lot of buildings out there, but there's a lot of concrete. And so these guys set up this whole thing within a matter of days. And so when the president comes tomorrow, he's going to be able to see, you're going to be able to do. What'll happen is you bring people in there. They ain't going anywhere once they're there unless you want them to go somewhere, because good luck getting the civilization. So the security is amazing. But natural and otherwise. But what it can be, I think, is an effective way to increase the number of removals and deportations, which ultimately, if you don't do that, you're going to continue to have this problem of illegal immigration. So you'll be able to bring people in, they'll get processed, they have an order of removal, then they can be queued, and the federal government can fly right on the runway, right there. You literally drive them 2,000 feet, put them on a plane, and then they're gone. It's very logistically simple, but what we're also going to do is, this idea of immigration judge, these are not Article 3 judges. They're not federal judges like we think of. These are executive branch employees who are called immigration judges. So you can you can deputize different employees to do that. So we've offered some of our National Guardsmen to be able to serve as immigration judges. So what you could have is, okay, someone's a criminal alien, they obviously fast track. Someone has an order of deportation, okay, fast track. Someone may have just gotten picked up. They can get like a notice to appear. Biden would tell you to come in 2 years. Under the Trump administration, it's usually within, 14 to 30 days. But we can have our National Guard acting as immigration judges right on site. So you go, maybe you have a day or two, whatever, and then a decision's made. And then that's it. So this is potentially be a force multiplier as this goes. And so, I did speak with the president this weekend. He's very excited about doing it. But I think what he wants to see is, Florida should not be the only one in this fight, right? We literally are doing what the voters who elected all of us have been demanding for many, many years. And immigration was maybe the number one issue, maybe inflation, but certainly no worse than the second most important issue in the 2024 presidential election. So we've got to do it. And we're also looking at Camp Blanding up in Northeast Florida, which has a runway. And again, similar thing, secure, not going to interrupt the community, be able to fly people out. The feds will do it. We flew to Martha's Vineyard, right? We could probably fly there, but I think they want to be in charge of that because there's diplomatic niceties that go on, and I get it. So, but I do think that if you increase the amount of space for processing and then to be able to get them ripe to then be able to return to their home country by the thousands, that's going to really make a difference. And in Florida, we estimate we've got 50,000 illegal aliens in Florida who have already been ordered to be removed by an immigration judge. So you talk about, they've gone through this process, they have an order to remove, and they're just still here. And so that's low-hanging fruit. But we were in a situation where there's such a limited space that ICE has. You know, do you want all of our jails to be overflowing with illegals, or would you rather have that done in a separate mission? Because, you know, unfortunately, we've got U.S. citizens committing crimes, and they are going to need to be held accountable. So it puts pressure on, it takes pressure off of our local institutions in a way that I think will be very, very efficient. So it should be, I think people are impressed. You know, I think a lot of people didn't even know there was an airport there. I mean, like, but there is there. I mean, it's a good facility. You know, things are being done in, I think, a very efficient fashion. And I was really, I mean, honestly, I was impressed, but I know dealing with the hurricane response and all the other, I mean, monoclonal antibodies during COVID. We would set up monoclonal antibody clinics on 24-hour notice. Hey, we need one in Jacksonville. 24 hours later, it's up. That's this emergency response apparatus that we have. So I think it'll be interesting to see. And I believe by tomorrow they will be open. So DHS approved us doing this last week, and I think by tomorrow it'll be ready for business. Yes. That's his plan.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that. Walk us through, if you can pull back the curtain and walk us through the process of how Florida is able to make this stuff happen so fast. I recall the bridge, remember after a hurricane 3 years ago, and people in other parts of the U.S. were involved in how we made that happen. So fast forward, whether people like it or not, how is this process able to happen? Just walk us through the steps.
It's just leadership and execution. We are a state that really understands when you're a skinny, you know, you're a peninsula sticking out in the middle of a tropical part of the world, you are going to have to deal with weather disasters. Now, we've had our share in the last however many years. Maybe we get a break this year, but we're prepared. And so you have that. You've also seen that put into place to head off the BLM riots back in 2020. You didn't see that happening here because we had response. Even when like spring break in Miami Beach, we had to send people in and get that in order. The monoclonal antibody, we used emergency response. There were obviously physicians and nurses on site, but the logistics of it was all through that. So we have wherewithal to be able to do things and do things quickly. What I told when I first became governor, I said, all right, we got to look to see what's happened well, what hasn't happened well, and different things. And a lot of people were frustrated with the power response in terms of being without power for 3 weeks or something. And so we launched our initiative to pre-stage the linemen. So it's a similar thing, honestly. I mean, it's not a detention facility, but we will set up camps where these folks are able to be there, ride out the storm, and then immediately go in and start reconnecting the power. So we just did Hurricane Milton. There were 4.2 million restorations in record time, and 99% of that was within a matter of days. The majority of that was within 24 hours. Usually in the past, folks weren't even on site working for another 72 hours, right? So we've done that. So it's a similar thing. You know, we had set out the plans to DHS. This is something they wanted to approve. And we knew we'd get the reimbursement, and we're doing it actually at a rate that's cheaper than what I think they anticipated. And so you do it and you make it happen. That's just how we roll in Florida. It's important, but the directive I gave was, okay, let's see what we can do better, but by all means, do not get ground down in bureaucracy. Do not get ground down in red tape. You know, we know what the policy is. You know, you obviously, there's certain things you have to check, obviously, but just get it done and stop acting like don't pass the buck, just do it. So that's what we do. And yeah, I think it's been something that we have great response. We work very quickly. Those are just the expectations.
I'm not trying to make light of any of this, but like when it comes to the facilities to make sure that sewage is being treated properly, I know some protesters
No. It's all self-contained. So they will be transporting out the wastewater to facilities. There's going to be zero impact on the surrounding area. They're going above and beyond on that. They do that as a matter of course anyways. I mean, if we were doing a hurricane response in like Fort Myers Beach, you're very sensitive about that. So it isn't any different. But this is, I think people think that somehow we just decided to build an airport out of whole cloth. No, that was there, right? It's a bunch of concrete. They're utilizing that, but it's interesting because they're utilizing the existing concrete footprint. Even on the interior of the airport where there's grass, they're staying off that grass. It's just grass, guys. It isn't anything, but that's what they were doing. So yes, so that'll all be self-contained. They're going to go to extraordinary lengths to ensure that. And obviously, I've invested how much billions and billions of dollars into increasing and improving the hydrology of the Everglades. If I thought somehow this was not going to hurt that, then I wouldn't do it. I mean, I think this is the most efficient and effective place to do it. No, the Florida residents are not going to know that this stuff's not going to impinge on them. Whereas if you put it in a more populated area, it might. This facility just happened to be there, so we'll do. But they've got a really strong management plan. And then some people ask, like, well, what if there's a hurricane? Like, you think they didn't think of that? Of course they do. Anytime you would do anything in Florida, you'd have to think about, what's going to be resistant at what. Now, this is more interior, and so the winds that you would get would likely not be as strong as what a major hurricane would bring right on the coast, but it still could potentially be significant. And so, of course, that they have plans and contingencies for all of that. So yes, that'll be done, and we would not have agreed to do it at that site if I thought that somehow it was going to negatively impact all the great work we've done on improving and restoring the Everglades. In fact, we're going to be opening up the C-43 reservoir here in a couple of weeks. Massive, monumental achievement to be able to have gotten that done. And so the progress has been fantastic. Yes. They let you. You're out in the wild, out of Tallahassee. He's at Tallahassee. He came all the way to the Villages to do the budget press conference. Thank you for doing that. So look, on the property tax, we need to do property tax. It's going to require us to go to the ballot and get it done. I know, I spoke with President Albritton yesterday about it. He's committed to do it. There's no excuses. In the House of Representatives, we have almost a 3-to-1 Republican majority. Is there any possible excuse for why you can't get it done? In the Florida Senate, we have more than a 2-to-1 majority. And so we will get that done one way or another. It's going to be a very significant issue for the balance of this year and into next year. Now, there was actually a provision they put in the tax for $1 million to this bureaucracy in Tallahassee called EDR. I mean, it's kind of like a state version of like the Congressional Budget Office. I've been very nonplussed by their analysis, so I vetoed that because we don't need to give a bureaucracy money to study this. We know what needs to be done, so let's just do it, and we will do it. Now, when you're looking at the budget, I mean, look, I think that the session was unnecessarily bumpy. It's one thing if you're clashing on principle, and I stand on principle. We've had disagreements amongst Senate, House in the past, and you kind of just work through those. There's some times where there's things that I have to really push for, that I get internal resistance. Most of those things, once they're enacted, everyone campaigns on them, but that's beside the point. And there's sometimes when it rises to the level of having an actual confrontation. I mean, I had to veto the redistricting maps a couple years ago, call a special session, and then we did maps that, I think are more consistent with the law and Constitution. And so we did that. This one, I think, was more driven by personal agendas, by kind of vendettas. I think it got really nasty between the House and Senate leadership. And I would just say most of what we have here was really a result of, a lot of the Senate working with our office to be able to land the plane in a way that I think the people of Florida respect. This House of Representatives, the way it does is like, you have the leadership and they tell you vote this way, vote that way, and they punish you if you don't vote the way they did. So for example, when I did the immigration, so literally we have the President of the United States coming down tomorrow to tout what Florida's done. But when I called the special session at the beginning of the year to say state and local must support, the Speaker of the House opposed that and tried to jam a bill in that would have eliminated all of my authority to enforce immigration laws. Why would you do that? Well, it was an amnesty bill, basically. But that wasn't driven. That was driven by a different agenda. That's not your agenda, right? And so, you saw a movement in the House of Representatives in Florida to kneecap our ability to have anti-woke higher education standards and to make sure that our universities are educating, not indoctrinating. People are looking to Florida for leadership on those issues. I mean, heck, even the New York Times has said, if you want to see what the Trump administration is trying to do, just look to Florida and look at all the stuff they've done. Now, they disapprove of what we've done, but they are acknowledging what we've done has been very meaningful. Why would you want to peel that back? No, nobody. And then we did a lot of tort reform, which has helped make, it's helped on costs because we were the #1 litigation state in the country. And so that was hard fought. And then they tried in the House to repeal a lot of that. And here's the thing. You don't have to agree with me. If they run and seek your vote on a certain agenda and then they implement it, if I don't like it, I can veto it, we can tussle, whatever. But that's not what happened here. These guys all ran on the agenda of Florida that's been so successful, that people around the country want to emulate in their states. They got elected on that pretense, and then because of the leadership in the House, they pursued an agenda that was foreign to what they told the voters when they got elected in 22, 24. And some of these House members would not have been elected if it wasn't for me in 2022. That was really what turned Florida from a swing state into a red state. And we're happy with that. But the reality is what's your agenda? And I think a lot of the agenda was not an agenda that the voters sent them there to do. And so I think the way it went 45 days, it didn't need to go 45 days. This could have been done 45 days earlier. I could have signed this budget a month ago and have substantially similar things. So I think what the House leadership did, I don't think it was successful. I don't think any of the gambits they did from trying to neuter us on immigration enforcement and try to promote amnesty, that failed. I think it failed to try to kneecap us on higher education reform. I think it failed to try to undo tort reform and on down the line. And so, we are where we are with this, but I think the budget reflects the hard work that a lot of the senators put in to getting this to where I think the people of Florida wanted to see. I'm having to fight for a Second Amendment holiday. Like, these guys all run on saying Second Amendment, and yet you're getting pushback on Second Amendment tax holiday? I mean, give me a break. So, that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles on this. But I think if you look at, okay, we're in a good spot. We got what the state needed. We got a good product. I think my vetoes that I did, I think were appropriate. I think the level that we got the budget back down to is similar to what I recommended, which is good. The debt repayment, and that was really driven by the Senate. I mean, they embraced our vision for debt repayment. I appreciate that. Topping off the rainy day fund. I know both chambers supported that. I think it's great. But we are where we are. But let's just be clear, you would not want to rerun that movie script, if you're the leadership in the Florida House of Representatives. It did not work. You did not have a mandate to do that. And so I think it'd be better, to not constantly be at war with the Senate, not constantly be at war with the governor, but actually do what the voters sent you there to do. And that's what we want. The Constitution, right? I mean, so what we're going to do is, as I said, look, if you're a snowbird or you have investment properties or commercial, that, I mean, look, ideally, like, I want, but where can we really make a difference? And I think it's on Floridians' primary homesteaded properties. I do not think you should have to pay just for the privilege of living into a house you already own. Now, we've run numbers, joint resolution, and both houses are going to have to pass it, and then the voters are going to have to approve it by 60%. So there's a lot of hurdles here, but I think that is really where we should focus on. Are there things where you can say, well, you don't get funding if you do that? Maybe, but I don't know that that would be sustainable or ultimately be as effective as we need to do. There's also limitations on how they can work with the millage rates and everything like that. I'm not sure that they are able under current Constitution to say, homesteaded property, you have no property tax, but then you have more. I mean, I don't know, maybe, but I think the people have said there's a question. So you put something on the ballot, that will settle it once and for all. But we started running numbers, and I think some people say, well, if you lose, if primary homeowners, homesteaded Floridians aren't paying taxes on their homes, then, how are you going to fund this or that? And like, what about these rural areas? So we've got 31 fiscally constrained counties, mostly rural. We've run the numbers. If we just wanted to backfill that lost revenue from the state, it's like $300 million a year. That's nothing. That would be easy to do. But I also think these local government budgets are bloated. They have grown a lot. Why? Because real estate values have gone up. People's property gets assessed higher and higher. And then you got to all of a sudden have a more significant tax bill. And I would have used that revenue to cut taxes and to let people keep more. I think a lot of our local governments used it to spend. So a lot of them have seen really significant budget increases. So if you just were to right size the budgets, and yes, do public safety, do all those, that gets you a long way there. But I think there's other things that those locals will be able to do. But man, imagine if you knew that your personal house, homesteaded in the state of Florida, means that you own it free and clear, and you're not having to constantly pony. I mean, that would really be, it's doable. And so we're going to be working through that to show everybody that it's something that's doable and that's something that's useful to do. But I think it's got to go on the ballot. I don't think that legislatively, with the constraints that the legislature faces under the current arrangement, I don't think it would be done that would be really, really effective.
CFO, lieutenant governor positions, I see some high-profile Republicans that are from the Central Florida area that were up there on stage with you. Any names?
So what I said, I said this kind of at the beginning of the legislative session. It's like, I'm going to get through the legislative session before I make those appointments. Now, I did think that legislative session would have ended earlier than it did. But now that we've brought this, I do have some bills to consider that are outstanding, and I will do that. But that obviously will be something that will be next on our agenda once we clear the decks from this, both in a lieutenant governor and a chief financial officer. So I would say that those decisions have not been made, I would say, first of all. But second of all, I will say that those will be in relatively short order, probably not before July 4th, because people are not going to be paying attention. But when we get back on there, that'll be something that we're going to do. Yes, sir. I did knock on wood.
Are you concerned with cuts to NOAA and the National Hurricane Center from the federal side, and the fact that our emergency management director is really focused on immigration? Now, are we ready for potential hurricanes?
Well, those are two different things. On the federal side, that's going to be up to them. So I can't answer that question in terms of what the impacts will be or not. We've worked well with National Hurricane Center. Our emergency management director is not focused only on immigration. In fact, to the contrary, we're constantly reevaluating what did we do in the previous cycle, how can we do going forward, and learning. And I would say that, certainly during my tenure, I don't think there's ever been a state that's responded to national disasters more robustly and effectively than the state of Florida. I mean, you mentioned that. We had a bridge knocked out in Pine Island in Southwest Florida after Ian. People were running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Finally, they came to me. It wasn't a state bridge. They say, hey, can you help us with this? And, look, a lot of people in my shoes would be like, well, if you help, then you own it. So if it doesn't go well, they'll blame you. So a lot of people would just say, hey, it's your, but I said, no, we'll do it. So, I said, these guys don't have 6 months to wait for this bridge. And so we took it, we looked at it, we acted, and we rebuilt it in 3 days. So, this stuff can happen. You just got to do it. But we will be ready. A lot of the folks that are involved in this immigration mission. Some of those vendors do a variety of things. It's not going to do that. The storms are our first priority when we're doing this. But we did the monoclonal antibody sites back in 21 all around the state in the middle of hurricane season. I mean, that was in August and September of 2021, and we were able to do that. And then, fortunately, we didn't have any major hurricanes that year, but we were able to respond. So we'll be ready to respond. And I think if you look at, go back to like 6 or 7 years ago, and look at power restoration, and then look how far that's come. And it's not just the investor-owned utilities like Florida Power and Light, which, they're a behemoth, right? They've got a lot of resources. Our rural co-ops were some of the fastest restorations after Milton of any outfit. And so you've seen great improvements in the rural cooperatives. It used to be if a hurricane came, you'd be like, well, man, I hope it's like FPL or one of those, because they people know they've got resources to get after it. And if you have a co-op, people are like, oh man, it's going to take longer. And that was true initially. But now, they've really done a good job. And so they're doing well there. Now, I do think there is a question about what role is the federal government going to play going forward, particularly post-storm. We handle the prep. We handle the initial response. Yeah, we'll have Coast Guard. We'll have some kind of federal assistance on the periphery, but it's mostly locally executed, state managed and directed, and then the feds come in and can reimburse us. But what will happen is if we do have a major event, what's the threshold going to be where they will approve us for financial assistance? If it's a major, then a lot of times you're going to reach that threshold. If it's like a category 2, does it reach the new thresholds? I think they've raised the threshold. So I think that's a question. I also think a question is okay, are you devolving stuff to the state? If so, devolve it. I'm happy to block grant me money if we have a hurricane, and then we'll administer that far more effectively than the federal government. We have not necessarily gotten anything that would give us any directive on that. So I do think if there's a storm that happens, I know FEMA's kind of in transition, what's that going to mean? Because there are existing programs for individual assistance and reimbursement of local governments, and if that's going to be devolved to the states, are you going to give us block grants, or we'll be able to manage that ourselves? Or are you going to say, you guys just figure it out? Now, if they say just figure it out, that is going to cause us to have to change some of the priorities that we've had. Now, fortunately, we've got a big surplus and we have a lot of money socked away. We'd probably be able to handle it, but I don't know that we would necessarily adopt the same programs that the federal government has adopted. So I think that post-storm, how that will work, what FEMA's role will that be, I do think that's somewhat in flux. And, honestly, it may be something that I talk to the president about tomorrow. All right, thanks, everybody. God bless you. You take care.